Welcome to Montana State of Mind with Montana. Now it is spooky season upon us, and I wanted to do not necessarily like a scary ghost story because I'm a big weenie, but still a poltergeist ghost story, if you will, that's more fun than frightening. Now, what this story is Jeff the Talking Mongoose, which was it's a real event that happened in the 1930s in the UK, specifically the Isle of Man. We'll get into the details in a second, but this is a cryptid story, if you will, that I became consumed with when I was a young lass. I mean, it's your typical teenage girl experience, becoming obsessed with cryptids and poltergeists and ghosts during your adolescence. And I literally read every book I could find in our school library on these things. Now, this was back before you could just go on the internet, of course, but I stumbled upon Jeff the Talking Mongoose, and I immediately became obsessed with it because the whole story, concept, evidence, it's so fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Recently, this past September in 2023, Nandor Fodor and the Talking Mongoose came out in the UK. It's like $10 on Amazon. I highly recommend watching it, even if you don't know the story or don't understand it. It's still a really fun, great movie that deals with, honestly, more than just a talking mongoose.
We hear with our eyes as much as we do our ears.
These people are lying.
I think he exists. I'm certain of it.
Just show yourself. I mean you no harm. Please. Jeff! Just show me that you're real.
I'm going to do probably the story of Jeff, just kind of the story. Then we're going to get into the investigations, such as Nandor Fodor. He was a real investigator during this case. And then we will get into the logical reasoning and then the supernatural reasoning, and we'll kind of at the end draw up our own conclusions, if you will. So let's get started.
Discuss.
Before I dive into the story, I kind of wanted to touch again on that movie. It stars Simon Pegg, Minnie Driver, Christopher Lloyd, and also the voice of Jeff is Neil Gaiman, who is a amazing author who has wrote, Good Omens, Coraline, American Gods, which are now great TV series. And I find it absolutely fantastic that Neil Gaiman is the voice of Jeff because, as you will see soon, Jeff is such a chaotic, neutral character. He is he's neither here nor there, spiritual, religious, logical, science. He's kind of just this entity that could really fit into all these categories, much like Neil Gaiman's works. So the fact that they got him to voice this little just chaotic, neutral character is absolutely fitting. And he will go down in history, in rodent voice acting history, along with probably Paul Lynde as Templeton in Charlotte's Web.
A bear is a veritable smorgasbord, after the crowds have ceased.
Now, who is Jeff? Jeff was a talking mongoose, if you will, weasel rodent-like creature that inhabited the Irving family's farmhouse on the Isle of Man during the 1930s. The story of Jeff was given extensive coverage in the UK during the 1930s and garnered a lot of attention from extremely famous paranormal investigators such as Harry Price, Richard S. Lambert, Nandor Fodor, and more. Now, the Irvings were a well-to-do, very highly educated family from the mainland, and after World War I, James Irving, the father, his business failed. And I believe his business was making organs or pianos or something. Obviously, that's not really going to last after a war. People's priorities are probably going to be elsewhere. Now, the family, aside from James, was also Margaret, the wife, and the daughter, Voirrey. They moved to the Isle of Man after his business failed to give a go at sheep farming, as we all do. In times of economic crisis, honestly, sheep is the way to go. Now, the farmland that they owned and the farmhouse was actually known to the island to be a place of supernatural activity. It was an ancient burial ground, which is always a great start. I wish more real estate listings included that. It also was the site of a lot of druid past activity in history. It was also really famous and well known to be a fae ground, a place for fairies to hang out. Whatever you would call that. A lot of fairy activity happened in this area. Now, all of that is to say that there was supernatural happenings on this location, this farmhouse, long before the Irvings got there. Again, the island kind of all experienced crazy things happening when they would walk near that area or play near that farmhouse. And honestly, it's probably why the Irvings got such a good deal on it. In about September of 1931, the Irvings started to hear a lot of scratching, rustling, critter noises, if you will, within the walls. And they assumed, like anyone else, that it was a rat problem. And so they went about to stuffing all the holes in the wall, putting out traps, keeping up food, normal stuff you would do to deter pests. However, the scratching then proceeded to become almost like a barking, like a cat or a small dog or even a baby, they kind of claimed it sounded like. A lot of gurgling, yipping, things of that nature. And so it kind of started interacting with the family through those sounds. And then it slowly tried to imitate their speech and what they were saying, almost like a parrot. You would say something, it would try to repeat it back to you. And James would do this all the time with nursery rhymes and poetry and questions. And slowly this voice started to recite things back to him. So much so that it one day just announced itself and said, "My name is Jeff. G-E-F. Just Jeff."
Right, I'm calling it Just Jack.
Jeff has stated, and there are quotes from Jeff. Within the movie itself, nearly everything that Jeff says in the movie are direct quotes. I will be saying them in this video, but he does have some direct quotes said from the man himself. Now, Jeff always kind of stated that he learned speech through the Irving family, that they took the time to teach him. However, the Irvings kind of believed that Jeff always knew how to speak, and he just didn't want to scare them, and he was just being really nice and slowly introducing himself to the family. And that way, when he was like, "Hi, my name's Jeff," they didn't immediately burn the house down.
Christmas, everybody!
Jeff's backstory, if you will, because he does have one. He stated that 80 years prior, he was ran out of New Delhi, India, by a man in a green turban and a hunchback. And now that is a very, very specific backstory, if you will. And we will kind of get into just how ludicrous the ramblings of Jeff are and how they are not likely to be made up by a person. Jeff quoted stating that he had 3 attractions. He follows Voiry, the daughter, Ma'am, Margaret, the wife, gives him food, and Jim answers his questions. And so he really attached himself to the Irving family. Now, of course, the Irvings also, with the reciting and teaching him to speak, if you will, they also were feeding him. And that will be a big play in our theory about Jeff's origins later on in this video. But they would feed him little treats, and he had a plate suspended from the ceiling that he would use the cross beams of the house and get to it and eat when he thought no one was looking. According to Voiry, Jeff was of a rodent size, kind of like a weasel. He had yellow fur and a big bushy tail. He wasn't necessarily a mongoose. That is kind of what the press ran with after a while. He himself stated, I believe he said, "I am a ghost in the form of a mongoose, and I shall haunt you with weird noises and clanking chains." You will soon see that he was a very theatrical little guy. Another aspect of Jeff's physical form that I find isn't talked about enough is the fact that he, instead of little tiny paws like a mongoose or an animal, if you will, would have, he had tiny doll-like human hands with 3 fingers and a thumb. And he also stated that he had feet. He has a direct quote about his appearance that he was saying, "I am a freak. I have hands and I have feet. If you saw me, you'd faint. You'd be petrified, mummified, turned into stone or a pillar of salt." You kind of wonder if he took this mongoose form just to be a little bit cuter. Although not a lot of people saw him, I'm not necessarily sure his motive. We will kind of go about that later. Now, the doll hands are actually a very important part of Jeff's antics.
I like, can I touch?
Real quick, so this picture is described as being James, whoever, James Irving pointing to Jeff's hands. Now, if that is accurate, and if those are Jeff's hands, I find that incredibly terrifying a little bit and very eerie. Could you imagine you are in your bed in in this farmhouse, there's no real electricity, you have an oil lamp, and you just see like these little hands creep over, and he's just like, "Hey," like, ooh. I would definitely be very I would have a drinking problem, to be honest, probably. Along with was he an animal, Jeff also stated that he was an earthbound spirit and a ghost in the form of a weasel. Now, did Jeff just stay in this form? He did majority of the time, but the Irvings also believed that he was able to shapeshift, of course. Why not? And so one night in about 1932, James and his daughter Voiry were walking home in a large cat, house cat size, but still pretty big, that was colored like a tiger, kind of ran at him and scared him. And so James, being a farmer, he didn't want this hurting his poultry or his animals, so he got his gun and he went after it. And as he was stalking it, the cat thing, went around a corner and disappeared. And that night, when he was recounting this to his wife, Jeff, of course, piped up and said, "It was me you saw, James." Remember Jeff's little tiny baby hands? So what makes him even more unnerving is the fact that Jeff also, he was very helpful to the family at times. So much so that in times of economic strife, he would go and hunt rabbits for the family so that they could then go sell them in the village for about 5 pence. A lot of people like to make off that the Irvings were a well-to-do family, but they actually weren't. They weren't necessarily poor, but I mean, he had lost his business as an organ maker, and Margaret was just a housewife and Voiry was just a daughter, so they weren't necessarily like a thriving family. The sheep farming business could only do so much, so they had to enlist the help of their little goblin, to pull his own weight. So the rabbits would be placed upon a ledge near the farmhouse. Very convenient, how thoughtful. A lot of people thought that Voiry was the one who was killing these rabbits. And now keep in mind, Jeff was killing so many rabbits that it was actually affecting the local fauna. He, I think, got around to 200 was his count in the time that he was around. And his method was strangling the rabbit, because Voiry's method of hunting rabbits was that she would use the sheepdog that they owned. I think his name was Moira or Mora. She would get the sheepdog to point at the rabbits, which causes them to freeze in fear, and then she would bludgeon them with a stick. Now, I know a lot of people are thinking this is the signs of a psychopath, but I assure you, honestly, when you grow up in the country, this is kind of how it was done before everybody had firearms at their beck and call. My own grandmother would, bludgeon a chicken with her bare hands back in the day. So this is not the signs of a psychopath. This is literally just how, honestly, a woman would hunt back in the day. Again, Voiry's method was bludgeoning him to death. It was very messy business. Now, Jeff's method was that he would strangle the rabbits with his tiny little baby hands, and the eyes would pop out nearly, and that's how you could tell who hunted what. And even the villagers, when they would receive the rabbits, stated that it was absolutely fascinating that there was no teeth marks, no bludgeon marks. All of these rabbits had been strangled by what looked to be very small hands. Not only did Jeff hunt for the family, he also kind of served as a house cat in the farmhouse. When there were rats or mice, he would take care of them. He didn't like killing them, though. He preferred to just frighten them. He would also tell the family of upcoming, people coming up the driveway, of an unfamiliar dog around the animals. He would, they said that if someone forgot to put out the fire at night in the stove, he would go and stomp it out. He also would wake you up if you overslept. Another little thing he loved to do was he liked to stay fit. He even said he liked to exercise, and so he would move around a 12-pound chair. Despite his small size, he was able to move it pretty well, and he would just constantly rearrange furniture. And he also, despite being very strong for his size, could do delicate things. He could throw needles at you, and he also liked to draw little self-portraits. The Irvings claimed that Jeff accompanied them into town or going to the market. However, he did stay in the hedges, so no one could see him, but he would talk the entire time. Obviously, this caught the attention of not only the island, but also the UK press. And a lot of people on the island, we'll see later, had their own Jeff stories. So it was not limited just to the Irving family's claims. A really fascinating quote from Jeff is he is stated as saying, "I'll split the atom. I am the 5th dimension. I am the 8th wonder of the world." And this is actually a real big hang up in the investigation of Jeff, because the theory of atom splitting was not published, much less well known to society, until 1939. And Jeff said this several years prior. And now Jeff actually had a knack for saying things that had not happened yet, again leading to that supernatural kind of origin theory. In fact, when the atom splitting theory was published, that was the last time anyone physically saw Jeff, was in 1939. And that was at James Irving's funeral, actually. The mourners that were present all reported that they heard scuffling and rumbling up in the ceiling above his casket. And pretty much everybody was in consensus that this was Jeff, paying his respects to old Jim. Margaret and Voiry left the farmhouse after James's death in the 1940s. They had to sell the property and the home at a loss because everybody thought it was haunted. And I really want to just touch on the fact that the family never, and I mean never, received a dime for any of the investigations, the people showing up at their house, the property, merch, whatever. Like, we'll get into it, but they received nothing from all of this happening. In 1946, Leslie Graham bought the farm from Margaret, and he stated that he shot and killed Jeff, but the body that he showed was obviously like a skunk or something, and even Voiry was like, that's not Jeff. Voiry herself died in 2005, and on her deathbed claimed that Jeff was not of her creation.
Hello?
Tamara. Tomorrow I shall let you see me.
So we did a brief synopsis of the, story of Jeff. And now we're going to get into the investigations and Jeff's interactions with reporters, doubters, investigators, anyone who was just truly interested in seeing what he was all about. A man named Charles Morrison, he claimed to be a skeptic, and he reported saying that he overheard Jeff and James chit-chatting on the farm, that, when you would walk by, you could hear James talking to this small little voice. And when James would recite a song or recite poetry, the voice would recite it back or ad-lib or create its own, just like a parrot, if you will. And also when James would tell Jeff to go do something for him, like a little favor, a little errand, Jeff would usually do it. Now, Charles obviously was of sound mind, and he assumed maybe this was James just killing time, doing chores on the farm, just talking in this little voice. He assumed maybe it was Voyre, the daughter, playing around with her father. However, Voyre was never seen, but you just never know. So anyways, he was a skeptic. He didn't necessarily believe that Jeff existed. Now, one night he did stay at the farmhouse to see if he would experience Jeff. And Jeff really hated doubters. And we will get into why in a little bit after this story, but he really did not like people who doubted his existence. And so Charles stated, remember, he is a skeptic at this time, stated that night he kept being woken up by these bangs and scratches and bumps. And finally, he had this large bump under his bed. So much so that when he went to look underneath, he stated as saying that he saw two glowing eyes staring back at him and a little voice that hissed, "Do you believe now?" And it lunged at his face. And then Charles left saying the whole night Jeff kept him up, again, banging, scratching, just being a asshole, honestly. Now, the most famous investigation was by Richard S. Lambert and Harry Price. We'll get into their investigation, is the more famous one, but they didn't really want to go all the way to the Isle of Man to go investigate a talking mongoose. They were kind of a little more higher class, if you will. Their cases were a little bigger profile, and they really thought this was Bush League, honestly. And so they sent a man named Captain Dennis. Jeff stated to Captain Dennis that he would not talk to him or interact with him unless he brought the family a camera or a gramophone. Of course, a lot of people thought that this was the family trying to get a little something, but they didn't. The captain was like, no. But I just kind of see it as Jeff was truly just trying to give his family something in return because, again, they weren't being paid for anything. In fact, they were losing money because they were having to cook and clean in-house all of these investigators. Remember what I said about Jeff was staunchly against reporters, investigators, really anybody who was doubting his existence. And I honestly kind of see him as an icon for why is he felt that it was an insult to be poked and prodded and be determined if he was real. Because as he stated, he knew he was real. And the Irvings knew he was real. And that was the only thing that mattered to him. He, was stated as saying, I'm not a science project for you to determine if I'm real. And why does my existence have to matter to people I don't care about? I know this might be kind of a little bit of a stretch, but in this climate that we are experiencing with a lot of people's genders and identities being questioned by literally other people, I think that Jeff's stance on this of why do I have to prove that I exist? I know I exist, and the people I love know that I exist. So what makes you an authority to determine if I'm real? So honestly, kind of an icon for that. I applaud Jeff. I hope that he becomes a pride mascot.
You better work.
as Jeff was berating Captain Dennis at one point, kind of telling him, like, why do I have to prove that I am anything to you? Who are you? And I, just kind of reading him to filth. Captain Dennis was trying to sneak up on him, up the stairs to try to catch him as he was yelling at him. And the captain fell down the stairs, rightfully so. Captain Dennis stated that he left partially again believing after being kind of chewed out by a small voice in the house. And so Richard S. Lambert and Harry Price finally were like, all right, let's go see what this is all about. The reports of what they found is in the book, The Haunting of Cashin's Gap. And again, they have, diary entries. They have the Irvings statements. However, again, the Irvings weren't paid. They were never paid for any of the royalties. They were never paid for any interview. These people just kept freaking talking. And Jeff was, you'll kind of see his actions, I think, portray him getting frustrated with the family not benefiting from any of these intruders. So a famous aspect of the investigation by Harry Price is he actually got a hair sample from Jeff. Apparently Jeff took it off himself. And he also had plaster molds of Jeff's bite marks and his handprints and footprints, if you will. And now he sent these to naturalists all over the UK, and they were sent to other naturalists. And the confirmation was the hair nor the feet or footprints or bite marks belonged to any known animal. It did not belong to a cat. It did not belong to a mongoose. It did not belong to a weasel, a rat, a cow, a horse, anything. They then theorized that they might have belonged to a long-haired dog. Keep in mind the Irvings did have a little sheepdog, so it could have been Moira's. However, the footprints were very interesting in the sense that the naturalists who studied them all kind of confirmed that the proportions of the hands to the feet were not proportional to any known animal. The front being too big, the back being too small. All of it was just, they were like, this is just a really weird, not proportional to any human hands and baby feet or baby hands to paws. Like, it was just this really unknown plaster set. And then the teeth were obviously too small to be of Moira's, so it wasn't her teeth marks. But again, they stated maybe it could have been some other dog. All in all, the hair and the handprints were not known to any known species, and they were again theorized to maybe have belonged to the dog. But I feel that if they thought they belonged to the dog, why didn't they just get the paw and teeth marks and hair from the dog and send those in to compare? I just feel like that could have really stitched that up pretty nicely, but I guess it just wasn't important enough. Henry Price's investigation, as well as James Irving's diary entries, are in the Senate House Library in the University of London. So if you ever want to go look at them, go check them out. Another famous piece of evidence is that Price observed the double paneling in the home. Now, the home was stone and wood, and when that's being built back then, there is a degree of separation within the walls. Now, this is perfect for Jeff to run amok throughout the walls and to kind of hang out, and that's kind of how he got around. However, it was also theorized that if you spoke into one wall, maybe it would sound off and go to the other room. And so Price and Lambert theorized that maybe this was how Jeff's voice was being pulled off if any of the family members were indeed doing it themselves. Now, again, this was theorized. It was never proven. I feel that they probably experimented. It might be in the literal investigation notes. I don't have a copy. But I just feel like if it was a hardcore evidence proven thing, it would have been kind of tidied up right then and there of this is how it's done. This is a hoax. Good day to you. But it was only theorized, And in fact, Lambert and Price left, and this was their official statement, saying it was more unlikely for the Irvings to sustain such a wild story than it would be for Jeff just to simply exist. Basically just saying it is easier to comprehend and accept the fact that there is a talking mongoose within this house than it is that this family of 3 would not only sustain the story, wholeheartedly believe it. None of them ever flubbed on any of the origins, the antics, anything. I mean, we'll kind of get into some theories, but the family, to their dying breath, confirmed that this was still real. And again, we'll kind of get into that they did not enjoy Jeff or the attention. I find it very cute, though, that when asked how Jeff felt about Henry Price and the whole investigation, he was stated as saying that Price put the kibosh on spirits. And now that is actually a really hip term. That was actually like real modern lingo at the time during the 1930s. And so Jeff, despite being very old or have lived a long time, still remains, pretty hip. Now, the last investigator of importance, there was a ton, but the last of the big ones was Nandor Fodor. And he is, from the movie. Now, the movie obviously takes a gratuitous storyline with Nandor Fodor, but he was a real investigator and he was one of the main ones to interact and work with Jeff. Nandor Fodor was the research officer for the International Institute for Psychical Research. I can't say that word. He was an official. He wasn't just some dude. He was like an official research officer. And now his approach to the supernatural later in his life became more clinical, if you will, more medical. It wasn't necessarily science, but it wasn't supernatural. He was trying to approach things through a psychological, medical kind of viewpoint. And he believed that Jeff could have been a split off personality from James, and that Jeff's cheeky, sarcastic, little zany personality was simply just a split off little piece of James Irving himself. Nandor Fodor, I believe, left believing in Jeff. I do think that he was one of the investigators that did believe, because I do remember that he left Jeff some biscuits and some chocolates. So I think despite him coming at it with a medical approach, he wanted to cover all bases and just leave Jeff like a thank you.
I'd say the wee rascal's probably watching us right now.
Okay, so we did the investigations and, let's kind of get into the logical responses. Those are never fun, but we must cover all bases. And so let's get into the logical reasonings that Jeff the Mongoose could even exist.
Come on! I'm listening to reason.
The most popular theory is that Voirrey was a ventriloquist and she was able to throw her voice around rooms. She was able to use the double paneling in the home to throw her voice way over there and make a little squeaky sound way over here, of which is a very, it makes sense. However, let's kind of dive into who started that and why. Now, the reason that the ventriloquist theory kind of came to a helm was because a reporter specifically was trying to interview the family and meet Jeff. And again, Jeff hated reporters. He hated having to constantly prove that he existed. He found it very annoying. And as this reporter was leaving the home, Marge and Jeff were talking in the kitchen, and she was kind of consoling Jeff and saying like, oh, he's gone, whatever. And Jeff was like, oh, no, he's not. He's listening in on this conversation right now. And I hope he knows I don't like reporters. I think they're stupid. That's not a direct quote, but that's kind of what he was saying, the vibe that he was giving. And so that reporter left very pressed that Jeff not only didn't show up for him, but also kind of read them to filth. And he wrote a very scathing newspaper article that not only said that Voiry was the reason of Jeff, that she was a ventriloquist, despite never having have done it ever in her life. She wasn't known in the city prior to their move as doing that. Never a party trick, never amongst her friends. Nobody had ever heard Voiry do ventriloquy or even, like I said, a party trick or anything prior or after this. But for some reason, everybody thinks she was one because of Jeff. I just feel like if she was a very talented ventriloquist, she would have shown that early on in her childhood. She would have shown that later in her adulthood. She even stated herself, "Don't you think I would charge if I was this good?" Again, they didn't earn any money. I digress. So again, and this reporter wrote in the article that Voiry was a very lonely girl with no friends. And that is detrimental to a 13-year-old. I'm sorry, you don't say that to about a 13-year-old girl. She did not have friends. Again, she said herself in an interview that nobody wanted, if you can imagine, to hang out with her because she was deemed as a spook. So yeah, once again, Jeff did not improve this family's lifestyle. So why would they keep it going if it was losing all their friends and costing them money? Okay, so what if it wasn't Voiry necessarily who is the talented ventriloquist? Maybe it was her father, because Jeff was always overheard chit-chatting with James. And so Jeff could be seen as like the world's most elaborate dad joke that just got really out of hand. But that would be very sweet because, again, it's a very lonely island. It's a very small island. And so he probably saw his daughter with no friends and made an imaginary friend for her. Very sweet. Contemporary media scholar Jeffrey Sconce writes that the most likely explanation is that this, quote, extra clever Mongoose was an imaginary companion created by the Irvings' extra clever daughter. 1937, Jeff actually went to court. He literally went to court. Like, you know, in the UK where the barristers or banister, whatever they're called, like they have the big wigs and stuff, that, like, it was brought to court because Richard Lambert was suing a fellow colleague for slander. That friend, Sir Cecil Levita, stated, let me look at my notes here, stated that Lambert was unfit to be on the board of the British Film Institute. Levita said that Lambert was, quote, off his head because he had believed in a talking mongoose. And so Lambert sued Levita for slander and brought Irving, you know, in to talk about Jeff. And so if you can imagine this courthouse with like their big wigs and their little hammer thingies are sitting there like yelling about a talking mongoose. Judge Judy could never.
Dismissed! Bring in the dancing lobsters!
Now, Lambert did win the case. He won a lot of money. He won about 7,600 pounds back then, which is about, I want to say, almost like $50,000, if not more in today's money. And again, James Irving, despite having gone and said his piece and literally being involved in every aspect of this, earned nothing. After reading how the investigators and people abused the privilege and the hospitality of the Irvings, I kind of understand again why Jeff hated all of them, because he's probably sitting there seeing this family constantly being questioned about his existence. And you would think like, well, if he loved them, Montana, why didn't he just dance on the table? Because you have to imagine he would have to do that for everybody that came over. No, he only cared about the Irvings. He did not care about anyone else. Why does he have to? Go home, Henry Price. Go home, Nandor Fodor. No one wants you here. The Irvings are just too nice to tell you to go the hell away. I get Jeff. I do. Before we kind of jump into the supernatural reasons, which are very fun, I want to tell about Jeff's more not fun side. Again, this family was not thriving under Jeff. Jeff did not bring good things to them. I don't want to say they were suffering necessarily, but Jeff wasn't the best house pet. He honestly kind of remind me of living like with Drop Dead Fred. That movie stresses me out. I don't enjoy it. My mom loves that movie, if that says anything. But it stresses me out, that chaotic kind of character. Just, oh, it gave me anxiety as a kid. I can't watch it now. But I imagine that's what it's like living with Jeff.
Well, then just stand there, do something. Come on. Come on, kiss him.
Problem is, nobody else can see him, and she's sorry that she can.
He was of an animal origin, I guess you could say. So he did urinate in the home in a lot of spots, and he would also throw up. He would throw up on the bedding. So much, like one time, James Irving and Madge were saying that they were woke up at like 5 a.m. and Jeff was like, oh, I don't feel good. Oh boy. James, I think it was the carrots. Like he literally said, like, I think it was like carrots or something. And he was like, I don't, And then they proceeded to have Jeff throw up on their bedspread. And if you own a cat or even a dog, nothing gets you up quicker than hearing that hurking sound in the middle of the night. A theory is that poltergeists are known to leave foul-smelling puddles. So if Jeff was a poltergeist, maybe that was it. And it not necessarily urine, but maybe it was just a weird poltergeist goop.
What happened? Are you okay?
He slimed me.
That's great! Actual physical contact!
Another lame aspect to having Jeff live in your walls is Jeff would get sick, not just tummy aches, but he would also get colds and flus, like anything else. And so he would just be hacking and coughing at all hours of the day and night. Just like, again, just like the worst roommate, and no one could sleep. No one could get a thought in because he's just in the walls. And I also find it very interesting that every time Jeff was sick, Voiry and the rest of the family, they were fine, and vice versa. And you would think that if she was such a talented ventriloquist, again, if she is so talented that if she has a cold, she is still able to perform the Jeff voice perfectly. Why is she doing this for? Well, put her in front of the queen, like that is stellar ventriloquy. I don't know if you've ever watched a ventriloquist. I know there was that one guy during the 2000s with the racist puppets. A lot of people liked him. Even that man, I've seen his stand up. You can tell he's doing it. Like, as talented as ventriloquy is, and it is talent, and it requires a lot of practice. Nobody heard her practice, and apparently she was able to do it while sick. I mean, another aspect is, remember when Jeff was so nice as to bring rabbits to the family? Well, he would also unionize, if you will, and if things weren't going his way, he would strike and he would stop. And his favorite curse words were hard-boiled eggs and nuts. Crack them and eat them. And so he would get really upset and just stomp through the walls, just saying, nuts, crack them and eat them. Nuts, crack them and eat them. And I can only imagine how annoying that would be after a while.
So mad I could stomp.
Do it, Mom! Do the stompy dance!
Don't bother bringing the mistletoe to bed! But do bring me a snack! Chocolate!
He only threatened to kill the Irvings once. That was very nice of him. And he was quoted as saying, I am not evil. I could be if I wanted. You don't know the damage or harm I could do if I were roused. I could kill you all, but I won't. He was also quoted as saying, if you are kind to me, I will bring you good luck. And if you are not kind, I shall kill all your poultry. I can get them wherever you put them. He also was, I know I stated that he really liked Voiry and he was very close and attached to her. But he was, attached. When they first started experiencing Jeff, they put Voiry in their bedroom, the mom and dad, and Jeff literally famously was quoted as screaming at them, I will follow her wherever she goes. And I don't know if this is a direct quote. this part, but you know, he was just saying like, wherever you put her, I will find her. And that's not super comforting.
Here's Johnny.
Jeff also had a very mature sense of humor at times, if you will. And this part would have especially drove me nuts, is that anytime James and Margaret were trying to have adult relations, if you will, Jeff would run outside and yell what they were doing to anybody that would hear. Now, that immediately would have prompted me to just snatch his little ass up, if you will. I would have found a way to catch his little fluffy butt. But yeah, why, if it was Voiry and she was like, you know, heard her parents, it's a small farmhouse, heard her parents and whatever, and her weird sense of humor, ran outside, don't you think her parents would, one, see it? A 13-year-old girl running outside is a little more noticeable than a tiny little weasel. Also, don't you think they would immediately stop that? But villagers heard, and the sex life of the Irvings probably suffered. He also would bother Margaret in the sense that when she was undressing, he would name every piece of garment that she would take off. You know, he would be like, blouse, panties, socks. And as a woman, that's really unnerving to experience. So I'm sure it was very creepy at first and then just really annoying after the first or second time. Despite him feeling kind of more mature with the Irvings and his sense of humor, he was a very cute companion to Voiry at times. When she was younger, they would play hide and seek together. They would play like little scavenger hunts. He had his own little favorite ball, and she said that he would dance and play with it. So again, he was very attached to Voiry. And as she grew up and grew out of the childlike games, he then would start going to town by himself. And that is where he kind of, he became a real gossip girl, if you will.
Look for a bouncer, there isn't one. Instead, the door is guarded by 10 jacked homeless guys in old-fashioned bathing suits. And inside it's just sick. Ice sculptures, winos, germs.
Germs?
German Smurfs.
And he would listen in and collect all kinds of gossip and report back to the Irvings. And that did not win favor at all with the Islanders because, you know, one, Jeff would also steal from people all the time. And so not only do they have trinkets and things, they also had information that never left their homes, that never left hushed conversations in private, that somehow these Irvings knew. And Jeff also kind of became clairvoyant later on, in the sense that he didn't even have to leave the farmhouse to know what people were doing and gossip. A lot of the villagers stated themselves that Jeff would take on the appearance of a man sometimes. Keep in mind, this is a very small island. Everybody knows everybody. And you literally see a boat come in and come out. Like, it's kind of hard to sneak up on these people. And so they did state that there was a strange man that no one knew where he lived. No one knew who he was. He didn't really interact with anybody. And they all just kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, must be Jeff. Some other villager, a lot of the consensus in the stories is essentially Jeff would just steal their lunch. You know, a fisherman, I believe, said that his sandwich just took off by itself into the bushes and he heard Jeff eating it. Jeff would kind of shit talk behind their backs and kind of yell things from the hedges. Again, if this was a 13-year-old girl, I feel that it would have been known by then. I mean, I'm not saying rural people are stupid. I is one, but I mean, give us some credit. I think we would know if a teenage girl was in the bushes shit talking us.
Miss Stoger, my plastic surgeon doesn't want me doing any activity where balls fly at my nose.
Well, there goes your social life.
So Jeff was so mind-numbingly difficult to live with day in and day out that the Irvings really did try to poison him one time. And when he ate the poison, the Irvings all said that Jeff proceeded to scream like a, quote, pig with a horseshoe being nailed into its snout. So imagine that. For 20 straight minutes. Again, If this was Voiry or any member of the family, or if this was some inside joke, don't you think they would stop it? Why would you want something, a fire alarm essentially going off for 20 straight minutes in your home? And then, adorably though, once he stopped screaming, they all stated that he proceeded to sigh and moan for an additional 20 minutes. I mean, Jeff was a drama queen, if anything. The only time that the Irvings were ever offered money for Jeff was Buffalo Bill's Wild West show or whatever it was, and they offered a pretty good sum for Jeff to obviously be a part of their show. It'd be a little slideshow, to which you think they could have done with just like any Mongoose and maybe like a tape recorder. I'm sure they had them back then, but whatever. But the Irvings did not turn him in. James Irving stated over and over again, quote, that no one would create such a silly story. And they were kind of like just exasperated, constantly saying, why would we make this up? Why would we put ourselves through this? Why would we, again, be not really liked by the rest of the Islanders? We are losing money. And, if Jeff is real, he sucks to live with, honestly. Both mother and daughter, after the father died, they then later stated that they personally were super embarrassed by all of it. Voiry herself was actually really shy and very introverted, and it gave her a lot of anxiety to have everybody come to the house all the time. And so they stated that they would have never told anybody whatsoever, but the father, the father wouldn't shut the hell up about it. They stated that the father honestly took it too far, and Voira in the 1970s, this is when she was last interviewed about Jeff specifically, journalist Walter McGraw tracked her down and persuaded her into an interview. Irving stated, quote, I was shy. I still am. He, Jeff, made me meet people I didn't want to meet. Then they said I was, quote, mental or ventriloquist. Believe me, if I was that good, I would jolly well be making my own money from it now. Jeff was very detrimental to my life. We were snubbed. The other children used to call me the spook. I had to leave the Isle of Man, and I hope that no one where I work now ever knows this story. Jeff has even kept me from getting married. How could I ever tell a man or his family about what happened? I don't think a family in the 1930s, much less a family of sheep farmers, would know about splitting atoms, about the fifth dimension, about the poetry in the song. I don't think they wouldn't even know about a mongoose. Let's be honest. I'm not saying they were stupid, but like, why would a family in the 1930s in the UK come up with a talking mongoose from New Delhi, India, that 80 years prior was chased off by a man with a green turban and a hunchback, and he likes chocolate and bananas and biscuits, and he has little hands for feet but yellow fur and a big bushy tail, and he can recite that he is from the fifth dimension and splits atoms. And it's a lot to expect from the average person in the 1930s. I'm sorry. The first theory we'll kind of dive into is that maybe Jeff was literally manifested by the family. Maybe this family of Irvings, combined with the location, again, it was on kind of the Bermuda Triangle of this island, maybe through sheer willpower, they willed Jeff into existence. Again, they manifested him. Now that one's kind of hard. That one's of the theories. That one's I think a pretty hard one to believe, because that is some strong supernatural powers that I feel like that family, if they could manifest a talking mongoose, wouldn't they manifest money too? A lot of people also theorize witches. Of course, they went to the witch theory. Believe me, that was a very popular one, because especially Margaret, the mother. Now, Margaret was seen as very eccentric. Actually, they all were seen as eccentric. Imagine like the Addams family moved to like a small town in Nebraska.
College? Private tutors.
Major?
Spells and hexes.
Liberal arts.
That was kind of how the Irvings were to the Isle of Man. Very eccentric, well-spoken, well-to-do city family that then moved to sheep herd on a small island in the middle of the ocean. And so Margaret was known to have very bewitching eyes. She was known to have just this air about her that these little country folk just didn't really trust. And so Jeff was theorized to be a familiar. Now, was he a familiar to the family, to Margaret, even to Rory? Maybe she was the witch. But I just feel that could be possible because a familiar is a contracted out, if you will, supernatural servant. I know a lot of TikTok witches and Instagram witches like to sit here and say that their cat or their dog or their horse or their snake or whatever little animal that they bought and have in their home is their familiar. It's not. It's not. Familiars are actually very dangerous, and you need to stop bringing it into your home. Familiars are, again, chaotic neutral parties. They are there to do work for you. They are not really your friends. I think, honestly, Salem the cat from Sabrina the Teenage Witch. He was not their pet. He was literally if you get into the lore, he was a prisoner serving his sentence, but he was a roommate, and that's kind of what a familiar is. They don't want to cuddle in your lap. They don't want to console you when you're sad like a dog or a cat will. They have their own vendetta and are just there to help you run errands, much like Jeff. Jeff could have been a familiar because he can turn into human or shapeshift outside of the farmhouse. He ran, errands, if you will, for the family, collected gossip, collected information for them. And he also did not necessarily benefit the family. Again, he was kind of a chaotic roommate.
Couldn't sleep last night. I tried reading the most boring thing I could find, but not even your diary could do the trick.
How'd you read my diary? It's locked.
I picked it with my dew claw. So, who's Harvey?
He's no one.
Yeah, no one with the world's most perfect sideburns.
That's enough.
Harvey and Sabrina, Harvey and Sabrina, Harvey.
He could be a familiar, honestly, but he didn't follow Rory and Margaret when they left the Isle of Man. So I don't think he was a familiar, because then they later didn't have any later on. And also the sexual harassment, you don't want to be sexually harassed by your own familiar. Now, my favorite theory, and the one that I really stick to, is that he was of the Fae, a fairy, if you will. Now, fairies are not necessarily the Disney Tinkerbell fairies. They are actually very mischievous little mythological beings. They, again, are very chaotic neutrals. I know I keep saying that, but that is literally what they are, in the sense that they are not going to hurt you. They will not kill you, but you're not going to really reap any benefits from having a fairy around. A lot of witches and practitioners of magic will tell you, be very careful with fairy gardens and fairy doors and just fairy rings and anything with the Fae. Because although Disney and a lot of modern media has made them more charming and cute, they aren't necessarily that. Again, a lot like Jeff's personality, they are mischievous, they are troublesome, they are annoying, and they are really impossible to get out. A lot of people believe that Jeff was of the Fae nature because in the way that the Irvings brought Jeff into their lives was exactly how you would with a Fae. You slowly start talking back to these things that are talking to you. You feed them. Don't feed them. Very gremlins, don't feed them. And they work their way into your home, and they're impossible to get out. Now, Jeff was also seen, like I said, like a fairy. He was a trickster. A lot of Fae are tricksters. If you go to my clown video, you will see the origins of the trickster persona and how it led to modern day clowns. It's very fascinating. I highly recommend. But anyways, Jeff was known as a very big trickster, obviously, and a lot of people think that he switched out his hair for the dog's hair just for laughs, because again, he didn't really care about being proven or anything. So who knows what antics Jeff got up to. Now, some bigger far-fetched theories are astral projection, and that is literally that he is not an alien necessarily, but just a being from a different time, a different place, a different galaxy, something our little human brains cannot understand. Now, last podcast on the left stated in their Jeff coverage, they had a theory that I found very interesting of this like electricity theory. Now, follow me here. We don't experience supernatural occurrences, gnomes, fairies, mermaids, the yokai from Japanese lore, the skinwalkers of native lore, all of this, the gene from the Middle East. We don't experience these things anymore due to all the electricity that is around us now. And electricity interferes with certain realms and astral projections. I know it sounds crazy. But I actually find that very fascinating in the sense that you experience these things the further away you are from modern technology and the closer you are to your iPhones and your computers and all of that stuff. We don't experience these mythological things anymore, and they could actually be real. They just cannot be perceived on a plane that is being interfered with electricity. So again, I'm not intelligent enough to kind of really get into that one, but I did find it very fascinating and definitely look into it. I think it is onto something. I think that the quote of him wanting to saying that he could split the atom and that he is of the fifth dimension really pushes some sort of different time realm, some kind of different fabric in reality clause in this, because again, and I cannot say this enough, how did he know? How did he know? How would a teenage girl, a farmer, an island, anybody know about splitting an atom? Even if he said it, even if it was published prior to the 1930s, it wasn't well known. And the lamest theory, but we have to say all of them, is the weasel voice box theory, in the sense that a ferret and a weasel or some type of rodent polecat creature mixed with another one and somehow developed a voice box that was able to imitate human sounds, kind of like a husky or a cat. But I do think that him yelling at reporters and talking to villagers limits that. So that's not really my favorite theory. The last thing I will say about Jeff's personality before we conclude here is that he had an infamous party trick, and it is the most impossible thing to prove when doing the Jeff debunking logical reasoning. Now, Jeff's little party trick, and it is seen in the movie a little bit, is that a guest would come in, or an investigator, whoever, would come in with a coin, heads or tails, and Jeff could look through his little peepee hole and tell you what it was. And now this was experimented with the lights out, with the family members gone, with one family member in and another family in, and asking them what they saw. It was done throughout the farm in different locations. And Jeff not only always got it right, but he was also able to tell you the opposite of the coin. Like if you were trying to trip him up and be like, okay, say it was heads, and you were like, what's the opposite of what it is? And he'd be like, it's tails, bitch. So again, that is the hardest one. I think that's what cemented a lot of guests and villagers, into believing in Jeff. And it's also the hardest one to prove. I mean, if it was voyeury, one, how did she see it in the dark? Two, how would she know it in another room? And then if all the family members are gone, they can't even signal to each other what it is. So your guess is as good as mine. My conclusion with Jeff will also kind of coincide with my review of the movie. Again, I highly recommend. It's a very short, sweet movie. Put it on Sunday when you're kind of cleaning your house. It's super cute. But in the movie, Nandor Fodor is dealing with far more than just a talking weasel thing. He is dealing with the death of his father. He is dealing with, honestly, why humans are obsessed with death. Harry Houdini famously, when his mother died, he went to every medium he could to try to contact her. And in doing so, he was finding a lot of people who were taking advantage of people's sorrow and sympathy and profiting off of it, lying to them. And so he was famous for debunking a lot of mediums and psychics. But he stated himself, and this is also in the movie, he wants to find a medium that can talk to his mom. He wants to believe. He's not debunking them to say it's not real. He's just trying to find a real one. And Nandor Fodor also follows this within the movie. He is not necessarily trying to find out if Jeff is real. He is struggling with death. And is there more to this existence than what we see day to day? Jeff represents not just a supernatural occurrence, but humanity itself. He represents what happens after death, honestly, because there has to be more. We need there to be more. I used to believe there was no harm in believing in conspiracy theories, aliens, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster. I thought they were very fun, and it was actually really healthy to question a lot. However, after 2016, I have to state that I can't say that anymore with a whole heart. After 2016, a lot of families have suffered under the conspiracy of QAnon, and it has harmed parents to children, spouses. It's harmed so many people. And so I cannot honestly say that simply believing in a conspiracy is harmless, when it is in fact proven to be very dangerous to a lot of Americans and individuals. And I bring that up to kind of show what Jeff represents, because to some, thinking that there is nothing when we die and this is all there is really comforting. It's a weight off of their shoulders. But to many others, it's absolutely terrifying and soul crushing. You have to consider that majority of people are not happy with their placement in life. They wake up, they go to their boring 8-to-5 job where they're probably not the boss, they're not the CEO, they're just a cog in the wheel. Then they go home to their not so fancy home, and they eat dinner with their kids that aren't that special. They're not going to be doctors or lawyers or actors or whatever they think is a great thing. And they look at their partner who they're not that attracted to, or that they married for the wrong reasons. And just knowing that this will be their life for the rest of their existence is almost too much to bear for many people. And therefore, that is what makes them susceptible to conspiracy theories. They are no longer the quarterback, of the football team. They are no longer Miss Homecoming Queen. They are no longer the main character of their story. In order to make up for their mediocre, if you will, existence, they want to believe in something that is more. They want to know the answers when you don't. They know what's right when you're the sheep following. They not only want to be the main character of their own story, but also yours as well. And I don't mean to be political when I bring that up. It's just a big example that I myself have experience with within my own family of, again, Jeff and conspiracy theories kind of represent a little bit more than simply believing something. And with QAnon, it can result in something very dangerous. So I do think we need to come at things with logic, with reasoning, with science. Again, I think we need to come at many things with that. However, I do hope that there is a 5% that remains in everybody of, many atheists that still won't mess with a Ouija board. A lot of, if you will, sane, logically minded people still have their superstitions. And even if they can't explain them, they still reserve, like I said, that 5% of well, maybe. I like to believe in Jeff. He is a harmless conspiracy theory, a harmless cryptid, if you will, that I think, why not? Why not? Why can't there be a Jeff the Talking Mongoose? I think that is fantastic. I will say that I still think that Jeff the Talking Mongoose represents way more to me, as well as everybody else that believes in him and any conspiracy theory or cryptid, if you will, than just simply a talking mongoose who worked his way onto a farm. He represents that there is more to this universe than we could ever understand, that we could ever fathom, that there will never be all of our questions answered, and that humans will experience supernatural occurrences because we crave them. We want there to still be magic and supernatural things. We need our gnomes, our trolls, our angels, our fairies, our mermaids, our dragons. We need these things in order to cope with our very limited human existence. So if I can say anything to you at the very end of this, is it should never be a question of, is this real or is it not? But why we desperately need them to be. Thank you so much for, watching this. Again, Jeff means a lot to me. Surprisingly, he is an icon and a legend, and I hope he gets more and more famous throughout the coming days. I hope, if anything, this can be my love letter to Jeff, if you will. If you're interested in more Jeff, I highly recommend Nandor Fodor and the Talking Mongoose. I also recommend Last Podcast on the Left has an episode on Jeff the Talking Mongoose. As always, please like and subscribe. Comment below if you want to discuss some more nuanced Jeffisms, if you will. And thank you so much. I hope you have a great Halloween season.